Breaking news, Donald Trump will be holding a rally any minute now in Ohio. You're looking at it right there. We're going to bring it to you live as soon as it begins. In the meanwhile, John Kasich and Marco Rubio also holding events this hour as well, each speaking at rallies in their own home states. And Ted Cruz speaking to a crowd in Peoria, Illinois. Tomorrow will, of course, be a defining moment in the Republican race. We've got 5 states that are heading to the polls, including the winner-take-all states of Ohio and Florida. The pressure is definitely on. Let's go straight out to Jeff Flock in Ohio, where Trump will be speaking any minute now. Jeff.
Well, we think any minute, although we've just gotten a report that maybe his plane is running a little bit late. They think it would be sometime in the 6 o'clock hour that he'll arrive. His rally here is at the airport, though, and if you look behind me, I would say we're now in the thousands, maybe 2, maybe that many. This is not going to be a huge crowd by Donald Trump rally standards, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say there's not going to be a single protest tonight. If there's a protester in the crowd, he's wearing a Donald Trump shirt right now, because that's about all we see out there, unless they're hiding very carefully. Take a look at the latest poll here, Charles. That is the Monmouth poll, and that one shows Governor Kasich with about a 5 percentage point lead on Donald Trump. But I tell you, a lot of negative campaign ads run today by Trump against Kasich, calling him out for his stand on immigration, calling him out for being a, quote, absentee governor. So I think Donald Trump sees the possibility of a knockout punch here today if he can win. But if Kasich pulls it off, then he's got a lot of reason to stay in the race, and maybe he becomes the more moderate alternative, the single more moderate establishment alternative to Donald Trump. We're going to keep watching it. He'll be at the podium back there, and maybe we'll even see his plane land as we look out of this hangar in Youngstown, Ohio. Charles.
Jeff Flock, thanks a lot. We'll certainly be coming right back to you. Right now, joining me, the panel, Tammy Bruce, Carl Higbee, Ford O'Connell, and Jenny Beth Martin. Ford, let me start with you. Ohio, Florida, everyone's focused on them. Winner take all. Of course, this is a crazy week of shenanigans. Where's the momentum right now?
Well, the momentum's with Donald Trump. The only question is whether or not he can sweep all 5. I do think that if he wins Florida and Ohio, he's going to be pretty good on the glide path to the nomination. But again, we just don't know. But everyone's also sleeping on North Carolina, Illinois, and Missouri. If Trump cleans up there and gets, say, 250 delegates, he's going to be a pretty safe bet to get to 1237.
Jenny Beth, how do you see this shaking out?
Well, I think that what we'll see at the end of tomorrow is what we've been saying at Tea Party Patriot Citizens Fund the last few weeks. It's a 2-man race. And I think that after tomorrow, we're going to see that it really will boil down to Donald Trump and Ted Cruz.
It is a 2-man race, in my opinion, as well. But what do you make of the notion that Kasich says he would bow out if he lost Ohio, but Marco Rubio not going anywhere? What do you make of that?
Well, I think that if Marco Rubio, I believe that he cares about the country the way that he says. He says he doesn't want Donald Trump to become the nominee. I think the way to do that is for him to, after we get through tomorrow and see how things shake out, to step back and evaluate his path forward and whether he really has a path to the nomination. We contend that he does not, and we're going to see that play out tomorrow.
Tammy, it's interesting because Ford talked about North Carolina, Illinois, and Missouri. Mm-hmm. If Rubio were out today, not going into those states, they become a lot more competitive and a better litmus test of Trump versus Cruz.
Yeah, look, other than Trump, we're still splitting the vote, right? Missouri, as a matter of fact, is really Ted Cruz's best chance to win tomorrow. But I think that you are looking at it. So I don't know. It's a good chance for Trump to sweep, but I don't necessarily expect that. I do think, though, Ohio presents a unique situation because it's a strangely kind of an open primary dynamic. People don't realize this, that when you register in Ohio, you don't attach yourself to a party. You get assigned to it when you vote at that time. So you can go in Ohio and be a Democrat, Libertarian, identify however way you want, and vote and ask for the Republican ballot. That, of course, will help Mr. Trump considerably. He's really within the margin of error with Governor Kasich, so you might see a surprise in that regard. And the surprise for Florida could be how the Cuban community is famously difficult to poll. And that, of course, is at the heart of Marco Rubio's support. I don't think it'll be enough for him to win. Frankly, I'm shocked that he has stayed in, but we'll see. We'll know more tomorrow. Clearly.
Yeah, I'm definitely shocked as well. In Ohio, Carl, CBS has it at 33-33, so you talk about within a margin Biden era. It is a horse race there.
Right, but you look at the bottom of that, it says of likely voters. The one thing that Trump's bringing to the table is the fact that most of his voters, many of his voters, have never voted before, so they're not going to be perceived as likely voters by those standards. So he's going to bring out a ton of people on Election Day that are not likely voters. It's just how Trump has been rolling through this campaign. I think it's extremely effective.
It has benefited him well, though, to Tammy's point, these states where anyone can vote, which I kind of think is kind of odd. I don't know why the GOP has
It's very strange, but there's also an issue regarding if you're the incumbent, like the governor is Kasich, if you are not leading considerably on your home turf, if you're tied with the challenger, you are likely to lose.
Right.
And that seems to be the case here.
Although the mayor's poll
Tammy,
has a 39-33, and Mama, to Jeff Flock's point, 40-35. Go ahead, Ford.
What I was going to say is if your goal is actually to block Trump from getting 1237, all this nonsense about a two-man race, I'm not sure ensures that. At this point, Trump has 44% of all the delegates. At this point in 2012, Mitt Romney had 56%. As long as the other three people have more than 50% of the delegates, you block Trump. Everyone says, well, a two-man race stops him. There is no guarantee of that. Right now, the best guarantee you have is having all four in there.
Although Jenny Beth, I know you're a Cruz supporter, but wouldn't it be, if there were a broker convention, easier to argue that if he lost a couple more states like a Missouri, that Donald Trump is not necessarily doesn't have to get the nomination, as opposed to him winning 35 states, albeit even if he's won by an average of 35%. What scenario would the Cruz camp like to see played out?
Well, because we're independent from the Cruz camp, I'm going to tell you what scenario we've seen from my perspective, which is not necessarily theirs. And that is that this can't go play out at a convention the way that everyone's talking about. As Tammy just pointed out, there are a lot of people who do not normally vote in this process that are coming out to vote. And the rules for the convention have certainly been in place, but I don't know that these new voters understand that in a primary that it's different than when you go to a general election. In a general election, you expect that when you vote, your vote matters, and the vote that you're casting, whoever winds up with the most votes is going to be the one who wins. And I think if it's neck and neck between two people, that's a bit of a different scenario. But if you're sitting there with one person who winds up with a huge bulk of the delegates, and then several others who don't, and all together they still have more, I think that creates a much more difficult situation, and they'll wind up being a revolt among Republican voters that we'll see
one
play
way or
out
the other.
through
You're saying there's going to be a revolt. Carl, you see it playing out that way?
Well, here's the thing: is Mitt Romney was succeeding with the aid of the Republican Party. Trump is succeeding despite all the attacks from the Republican Party. So if you look at it, like, he's not doing badly by any standard. The fact that he is literally standing on his own in the political atmosphere, and he's still dominating.
Right. But and these states, and Tammy's brought this up, where only Republicans can vote.
Right.
Cruz has been very successful in those states. Wyoming is a small state, but he dominated there over the weekend, and that's considered one of the top 5 most conservative states out there.
And you look at what's going on now. I think what we're going to see, though, in the general election, you're going to start seeing Democrats vote for Trump in high numbers right now because they like what he has to say.
Well, it's the Michigan factor, right? If you can turn Michigan red because of the working class individuals who've been abandoned by the Democratic Party, where trade is the issue, all of these things have been dismissed has been, I think really helping Mr. Trump. But Ted Cruz has also been succeeding despite the establishment. If those two united, it would be over. The egos have got to be moved away. Kasich and Rubio need to admit that there's no mathematical chance. And you talk about uniting people, that's the way to do it, but the establishment seems to not want to do that.
There's a lot at stake.
Asking politicians to put their egos aside is like asking a thief not to steal.
Some can do it. Some can do it. Some can do it. We're asking for them to look to their better selves at this point.
It looks like they kind of generally do it sort of like after the fact, right? Jeb does it 2 or 3 states later. I haven't seen any of them take think that the better part of valor is to get out before, not long after it was evident. Let's go back out to Ohio, though. I want to go out to Jeff Flock, get a sense of the anticipation there. Jeff, how's it going?
Yeah, still anticipating Donald Trump. As I said, this is going to be a small number in terms of Trump rallies, I think. As I said, I think maybe 2,000 is generous at the moment. Having spent some time with the the Kasich campaign today, too, I would just say, and listening to your guests there, that I think that campaign knows that if it is fortunate enough to win here in Ohio and Marco Rubio loses Florida and is forced to drop out, they've got to then start producing some victories of their own, or they don't have a viable path forward either. They think, however, they can do that. Slow and steady, they think, wins that race ultimately. And, you talk about the establishment and the moderate Republicans and the people that don't like Donald Trump. That's not an insignificant number of people either. So they see a path not to win enough delegates before the convention, perhaps, but to get to the convention and perhaps have something happen there that they like.
All right, I hear you. Let me ask you about that, Carl. A lot of people are saying, listen, we know that the Trump rallies are huge and he's boisterous and he's bombastic and he's dominating the headlines. We're waiting for him to land in Ohio. But what about the folks who haven't voted for him in the party? Do they have a voice? Because so far the majority haven't voted for him. And how does Donald Trump, who says he wants to unify the country, unify his own party first?
Well, I think it's funny is you get a lot of people, you get especially the Cruz people who say, like, I will never vote for Donald Trump if he's the nominee. I promise I'll never vote. Look, if Ted Cruz was the nominee tomorrow, I would get behind him and push just as hard as I'm pushing for Trump. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of these people, they say that now, but all the people who are just as against Donald Trump are going to be for him as soon as he wins the nomination.
They're going to have a hard time saying, I'll let Hillary and or Bernie in the White House. All right, guys, thanks a lot. Of course, we are waiting for Donald Trump. He's going to be landing and then speaking any moment now. He's doing these things where he lands at the airport and just gives a big speech at a hangar. It's pretty cool. The crowd is packed. They're ready to go. And Donald Trump, you're looking at it right there. Any minute now, we'll land and rally in Ohio. We'll be right back.